We get our weekly groceries delivered through Instacart because once football season starts, game time is family time. I can get everything my family needs for the week, from reliable staples to specialty ingredients, all delivered right to my door in as fast as 1 hour. So I can stay on my game without missing a minute of the game. Visit instacart.com or download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply. Instacart. Add life to cart.
Miracles, paranormal, supernatural, unexplained. It's kind of a time for that with all the chaos, the upheaval, the unpredictable environment that we are living right now in our reality. Somebody I wanted to reconnect with because of the circumstances and because of everything that's going on is Mike McCord. And you can find him on the website miraclesonestepatatime.com. And so the book that talks about that is actually online, and you're going to be hearing his story firsthand, but we're also going to throw in some other things because Mike has a lot of anomalous activity in his life and has had for a long time. That part of that was also the miracles. But if you want to get the book, just to kind of get ahead of the game, One Step at a Time, Memoir of a Former Quadriplegic, okay, and let that sink in. Reclaim Your Right to Health and Happiness, Michael McCord. All right. Mike, this is the first time I've seen your website. It is fantastic. The mountain there, the background, and you were in the hospital and the nurses were around you and you're kind of incapacitated or definitely incapacitated and saying, I'm going to climb a mountain. And they said, well, let's just focus on walking first. You have come such a long way. And that is a story I think that people need to hear because of the ability that you demonstrate in coming back from that hospital bed. So, welcome.
Well, thank you, Wendy. I really do appreciate your having me on again. It's great to reconnect with you as well. I follow your website and your shows, and I always find them fascinating. You are a true gift to everybody out there who cares about these sorts of things.
Thank you. All right. I know that this is one of those things where there's no good place to start except from what was the accident?
Well, it all began, not a dark and stormy night, although I guess it was a dark and stormy night. This was on February 8th of 2001. I was at home. We had a family function. And I woke up in the middle of the night and was dizzy. I was walking up the stairs, and next thing I knew, I was on the floor. I had gone backwards down some stairs and couldn't move. We learned that I had broken my neck and damaged my spinal cord. This began the whole process. I was, completely incapacitated. I couldn't sit up. I couldn't really do much of anything. I couldn't breathe and drink and swallow and so forth. But I was what they call a grade C, low functioning quadriplegic, and the neurosurgeon said only around 10% of the people with that kind of injury ever walk again. So that began the whole process, but in a long story. There was some really dark times, but there were some very good times that enabled me to recover from that injury. I won't go into all the details at this point, but that was followed by getting laid off from my job with a major bank company, and my wife divorced me. We'd been married 30 years. It wasn't totally because of the injury, but it was certainly a factor. So those were really dark times, and I really learned a lot through that process, and I think I've overcome them pretty much. I'm about 90% recovered now, maybe 95%. Still a few issues, including pain at night. I told the doctors I was going to climb a mountain, and they said, "Oh, let's get you walking." And I did that. I climbed Mount Elbert, which is my second 14er. And I said to all of the doctors and thanked them. I said I reminded them to never use the word can't with your patients because you don't really know what their attitude is and their belief system and their determination. So there's a lot of factors into it. We can talk more about it, but I feel very blessed, and I feel my life is more fulfilled and better than it's ever been.
Well, okay, and so we're just glossing over that right now, but if you're interested and want to find out more about the entire process, One Step at a Time, Memoir of a Former Quadriplegic, and that's available through your website, or Amazon, wherever, just do a Google search, you'll pick it up. And the website, again, miraclesonestepatatime.com. What I also wanted to get into is you're a MUFON investigator, and that's where this paranormal stuff comes in. But there was a paranormal element that I thought was absolutely mind-blowing when you were driving down the road and realized you had something in your car that you didn't put there. And that also plays into this. Can you want to tell that story?
Well, there's been a lot of things like that in my life. And that actually happened back up when I lived in Nebraska, in Grand Island, Nebraska. And one morning, I have a 1965 Mustang that I've owned forever and still do, and very proud of it. But I was going to take the car to work one morning, and there was a man's cane in the car. It was an old wooden cane, very crude, no walking assistance or anything to it, just basic cane. And I thought, well, man, that's really strange. Well, I figured, well, maybe some guy was looking in the car and left it there. So I left it on the front seat for 2 or 3 days. He never did come back. So I still have that cane to this day. And the irony is, for years we made a joke out of it, like the miracle on 38th Street, with
yes.
Santa Claus's cane in the corner
yes.
and all that. But I still have that cane, and the irony is I now use that cane. And I don't know whether it was delivered to me, or whether it was me going back in time. I don't know what happened, but that's one of a number of strange things that have happened in my life, and I do use that cane to this day. See,
that's what's so amazing about it, is that it was like a precursor saying, you're going to walk again, and by the way, this will come in handy.
Yep.
Okay, and go ahead.
Oh, I don't know how you want to proceed. I was going to say I learned a lot of things out of this process, and we can go into that in more detail if you'd like. But I mean, I think they apply to not only to my situation, but to everybody's situation in life, including this pandemic that we're in right now. Because one of the things that I learned is not to look at yourself as a victim, to appreciate every moment, and to really do kindness to others can really have an effect not only on your health but on others. We really can influence, the entire world through our thought process, and this has been proven scientifically. And I try to connect the science and spirituality aspect of these things in my book, and it's true. It all works.
Well, and that part of it is your mindset. Like when you said, "Don't let the doctor ever tell you never." It seemed when you heard that there was an obstinate response of that's all you needed to hear was never, because it was not going to apply to you one way or the other. That seemed to be for you one of those inspiring moments that said, you're wrong. You don't know me, because from your recovery, it's these are the 10% odds of people ever walking again. Let alone the mobility that you have, the independence that you have. That's extraordinary.
Well, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And it really, I mean, I didn't think this up, but I mean, I really believe it, that our only limitations are those we impose upon ourselves. I mean, I know there's some horrible situations out there, people, and facing all kinds of dire straits, physically, financially, emotionally, and everything. But one of the lessons I learned is that you're really not a victim, that you're in control of everything, even if it's a matter of just how you look at things. And the only limitations we have are those we place upon ourselves. So, that's why I say don't ever give up, and don't ever let somebody tell you can't do something, because you can. You can, you don't necessarily have to climb a mountain, but you are in control of your situation. I met so many people during my recovery who were just true inspirations. I can think of several stories where people that they gave even less of a chance than I had of walking. One man in particular, he had an accident in high school, and he had they gave him like a 2% of chance of walking. He was in the hospital for a long time, but he was similar. He wouldn't give up. He tried and worked until finally he could walk again. Eventually, he became totally recovered. He was a young guy at the time. He joined the Air Force and ended up fighting Air Force jet. I think it was fighting Falcons, they were called. And his mom told me the story. He had just retired the year before, but it was a truly inspirational story. When I heard things like that, And that, in addition to just realizing the miracle that we all have around us every moment of every day, whether it's just watching the sun come up or watching the dew on a leaf, or even the shadow on the bark of a tree, it truly is a miracle. And I think that if you look at things in that way, from eyes of love and appreciation as compared to fear, that is one of the secrets to healing and happiness.
We're going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk with you about, you said a lot of things have happened in your life. It wasn't just the paranormal element with the cane, but I want to go back into that with Nebraska, some of your prior experiences that play into this. It said we're not alone, even though we don't see what's around us. There are things going on. And this is Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Mike McCord is my guest. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. My guest, Mike McCord. He has an incredible story, being a quadriplegic and coming back from that to being able to climb a mountain. The website is miracles1stepatatime.com. And the book is One Step at a Time, Memoir of a Former Quadriplegic. And it reveals the interconnectedness of science and spirituality. Mike thought himself back to health. That makes him a living example of how changing your thoughts, believing in yourself, you give yourself the power to basically achieve miracles, which is what this is by anybody's definition. So we wanted to talk about that, and then the MUFON stuff and the paranormal stuff that also factors into his life, starting with, well, when he was a kid. Do you remember your first experience where you thought, well, maybe this is a little different reality than I have been shown or taught? Do you remember as a child having those unusual experiences?
Well, in my case, it was precognitive dreams. From the time I was a little kid, because all my life I've had dreams that things come true. And I can remember one. I was in the Nebraska football, of course, and from Nebraska, of course, Cornhusker. And I can remember having a dream about a game that they won on this last second play, and it happened just exactly as I had dreamt it. And this happened many times. I can remember one time in Grand Island where I had what's called a mystical experience, and I wasn't even into this stuff particularly, but I remember waking up in the middle of the night and everything was just like I was a part of the cosmos. It was almost beyond words, where I felt like I was a part of the most distant quasar, and it was a part of me. And it was just amazing. I remember thinking, man, what a busy place, the universe is, and all of this energy and things going around. And it was just amazing. And I remember thinking, this is cool. I'm going to do this every day. And I've had it maybe two. It didn't quite happen that way. I think I had it maybe a couple of times since then. But it really proved to me that what they say, that everything is one. Time is one. We're all one with the universe. It's one of us. And you can put it in terms of God, too, that everything is together. That's why we really need to, come together and realize that we're all part of that one consciousness, that we have to, appreciate one another. But I've had experiences all my life when I was in Nebraska and then down here. I mean, paranormal things. I even have a chapter in the book I call Strange Occurrences. That, just a series of things that went on. Finally I had to call an exorcist, quite frankly, and that was a real experience in itself. But, I had things like goldfish disappear out of my goldfish tank. One time my cat disappeared. I had gone to a meeting, and all kinds of things. They had warned us at the meeting the place was haunted.
Let's mention that, because that's a Kansas City area, and people are familiar with it, and it does have quite a history. Yeah.
Well, that was in 2004. I think George Bush had been just elected. It was a meeting at the Writer's Place on Pennsylvania. I think it was called "What do we do now?" Show my politics here, but
yes.
But at any rate, so they started up by saying, "Oh, we have ghosts, don't let it bother you," and all that. So I was sitting there listening to this meeting, and I looked down, and there was a thumbprint, on my hand, like someone had taken their thumbnail and pushed it into my hand. And I thought, wow, that is strange. I didn't know how that got there. And then, so a few minutes later, I looked down, and there was a spot of blood on my arm, which was even weirder. So anyway, when I went home, immediately things began to happen. it was bizarre. Just like I walked in the house like I'd never been there before, and all kinds of noises and knocks, like something came in through the window one night. It was really, really weird. But the strangest thing was my little kitty disappeared. Her name was Sabrina. And I couldn't find her. I could hear her once in a while, but for about a day and a half, I couldn't find her. And then finally I looked down, and after I checked her to bed 100 times, but when I looked, I found her. She was hiding under the bed.
Mm-hmm.
So when I pulled her out, she was terrified, and she had feces spread all over her chest. It stunk and everything. It was like fresh too.
Mm-hmm.
And it just really, I felt so sorry for the poor little kitty, and also what happened. So I did call someone who did a remote clearing of the house, and it did go away after about 3 days. But that was one. And then many things happened during the recovery that I mentioned in the book, and without going to all of them, I could, but
okay.
But I
well,
guess, I really
hang on to that, and let's get into some of that in a minute. But I want to go back with the cat, because what that is about is an attachment. You picked up something, a visitor, when you went to the meeting, and the clue was the fact that you had that imprint and then the spot of blood, that you didn't leave home or go back home alone. And that's worth mentioning, that obviously this happens to you more than one time. And what have you done to kind of keep that from becoming a regular occurrence? That's my question for that.
Well, quite frankly, it is a regular occurrence. And it's a sort of a battle going on with me. And I think it comes from being open to so many things that sometimes you can let bad things come in as well as good. So that's part of the message is the same message that I have, that you can't look at yourself as a victim, and you can't let it control you. You can accept it, and not let it, the main thing is to accept it, but not let it bother you, not let it dominate your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my case, that's what I've done. And that's, the way I look at everything in my life. So nothing can hurt you unless you let them. And I feel that applies to so many things, both in today's world and personally. So that's the way how I deal with it. That nothing can control me because I don't want to let.
Well, and we'll get into some of that a little bit more, because you just mentioned a lot of the things that happened during your recovery period, and that's really also a part of this, that you seem to have a lot more overt paranormal poltergeist type activity around you, and dealing with that. When you said you called in the exorcist, that's, how do we say, there are a lot of different ways to protect yourself, to kind of, put a buffer, a barrier, a guard around you. But when you are so open, you're constantly going in and out of circumstances where there are other elements that we don't always acknowledge on the physical plane, that are around us. And with your going between both worlds, especially healing and having the paranormal abilities that you had as a child, being able, with the precognition and all of that, there's a door open for you that I think most people aren't necessarily conscious of. And that's where you have so much to offer in explaining that these things aren't abnormal. They're part of a normal reality when you are extra sensitive or you have heightened sensory awareness. That's why I wanted to talk with you, because right now there have been reports of people self-isolating who are discovering they actually live in a haunted house, and they didn't know that, or they might have suspected it, but now they can't get away from it because all of a sudden it's front and center. And your way of coping with these kinds of things, I think, is helpful. And I think that also has a lot to do with your ability to track UFOs. And if we don't have time for it during this interview, we will make time for it in the extended interview. And I post those at Wendy's Coffee House, Audio Boom, in the archives. I also want to make a point to include the endorsement from Larry Dossey. Larry says, Mike reminds us that although tragedies happen, so does healing, a lesson we must never forget. Got to take a break. Back with Mike McCord. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. My guest is Mike McCord, One Step at a Time, memoir of a former quadriplegic. That's the name of the book. And the other thing, though, is that he's a MUFON investigator. And part of that stems from the fact that he's had all of these experiences throughout his life. I even have a picture somewhere in my files that I posted at one point with you. And then in the background, you can see this little object. And it's like there's a UFO. Okay, Mike, they follow you. Is there... Is there a clue, a tie, a thread? What are they like?
Well, yeah, I guess as with everybody, nobody really knows for sure. But yeah, I've always had an interest in things, strange things, whether it was Bigfoot or ghosts or whatever, since I was a little kid, and obviously UFOs. I belonged to what was called NICAP when I was about 12. It's called National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, and I always had an interest in these kinds of things. And that probably plays into it because the more you subconsciously even invite these things, the more they come into your life. But I've had, since I became a MUFON investigator in 2011, I think I've investigated around 80 cases, somewhere in that neighborhood. I have some amazing stories I could tell. But in addition, I've had at least 4 experiences myself since 2011, and it's becoming increasingly apparent that they're aware of me. I think I shared with you, Wendy, before we came on the air, just in January of this year, I was working. I just actually retired, but I was working at the time, and I was in the federal building in Kansas City, Kansas, and I had my office a cubicle has this panoramic view of the Wheeler Airport and the whole city skyline. So I was working late, and I heard a tremendous roar, then a second roar, then a third roar. So I went to the window to look to see what that might be. But I thought maybe I could see what was causing it. But what it actually was 3 F-18s taking off to return to Virginia. But what I saw was first a triangular-shaped object that went right over the top of the federal building. So I was amazed, of course. Then I went outside. I was going to go to this meeting, and I was by the car. It was a cloudy night, and I saw a little star, what appeared to be a little star, over to the east, maybe around the Argosy Casino. But when I looked, it took off and went right over the top of me, just streaked over the top of me out of sight. Then I saw a second object to the southeast. This one did the same thing. It went over the top of me, made a left-hand turn, and stopped. And third, I saw a third object, and it did the same thing, went over the top of me and stopped. Well, this freaked me out. I mean, it scared me because I realized these things are aware of me.
Yeah.
Me. So I left, and I've had at least one other experience where they reacted to me, two actually. So they are aware of me, and including things going on at the moment that I don't know what the end game is, but they are, I think, watching me or aware of me. But again, like with everything, I'm not going to let it control my life, and I'm certainly not going to live in fear over it.
I remember doing the channeling that I do and doing that kind of thing. The instruction from the guides was, be careful what you think about, because the minute you turn your focus on them, then they focus on you. So don't call attention to yourself unless you're serious, basically, is what that meant. When you want to enter that room, they're already there, and they'll know when you open that door. And that seems to be exactly what you're saying, is that when you're thinking or aware, then you draw it to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think this is one of the takeaways I have from my life is that we believe and expect to happen in our daily lives actually has a direct and power effect on what will happen. And this can be good or bad. And not only that, the way we think can have an effect on the world. As you probably know, Roger Nelson did an experiment with Princeton University, and they did a thing called the consciousness experiment. This was in the late 90s, where they connected random number generators on computers, and they found that during times of crisis, these computers would start generating non-random numbers. And it was like before 9/11, before Princess Diana was killed, and things like that. So we do have an effect on our life. And you're right, like attracts like in many ways. And again, it's not just UFOs. There are other things out there. As I've had experiences, I know you have, Wendy, too. So yeah, be careful what you think. Don't dwell in the negative or fearful ideas, because they do feed off of that.
Well, and a lot of it has to do with consciousness. We're all connected, as you were saying earlier. No matter what the physical shape of us is, whether we're an animal, a person, a plant, I believe everything is connected on some level. And there was a quote I actually just saw today from Dean Radin: even if we're not consciously aware of remote events, our bodies may respond to them in measurable ways. And that's like that consciousness experiment, that with the entire planet going through this chaos right now, then we are in some way, shape, or form impacted. And it's really important to understand that these responses we have, whether it's nerves, whether it's, inability to sleep, or whether anxiety, fear, all of this stuff, then we do have a chance to rephrase, refresh, redirect that energy, as long as we understand it isn't necessarily our stuff. And then that's where we have the power and we take it back. How would you address that?
Well, I completely agree, and I think David Hawkins spoke about this in his book Power versus Force, where they did, I think it was muscle testing to kind of calibrate the vibration of people. And I think that has been a few years ago now, but at that time, the world, in general, the people they tested vibrated, and I forget exactly the system they used, but it was around 190 was the general level. But they found that the higher your level of consciousness is, your awareness, your spirituality, I guess, whatever word you want to use, the more it impacts both your life and the world around you. And I think, for example, Jesus would have been the top, probably 1,000. But the higher you go, this has a geometric effect on the world. And so what you put out in your own life towards the world, if it's fear, you're going to have more fear. If you put out hope, love, kindness, things along those lines, that will help begat those things to happen. So I think in this time of life, particularly with all the fear going on at so many levels, we have to keep that thought to not become obsessed with it, and to really look at the good in every person, and know that in the end things are going to be fine, because you have an effect not only on yourself but on the world around you.
What I think is interesting about that, to me, I see it as a reflection. The universe is reflecting whatever I'm transmitting, broadcasting at the time. So if I am broadcasting fear, then I'm going to have a situation where I bring fear back to me. Or if I'm broadcasting health, then I see healthy situations, or, an opportunity to improve my health. That's what's coming to me and saying, yes, this is what you're asking for. This is what you're broadcasting. And here's the reflection. There's somebody on Facebook who he writes a lot of stuff, and he's I've actually interviewed him before, but it was so funny because I posted something about the two swans during lockdown. There was a swan who was, I think her mate died, ran into a window, I believe, and they mate for life. So for 4 years she was swimming alone. And then during lockdown, they had an injured male swan, and she rejected all the other suitors. It was like, no. But they were together. And so when they tried to take her away, he stood in the way, so they couldn't remove her. And when they finally did get her ready to transport, there was an obvious connection. She didn't want to go without him, and she was crying for him. So that was a thing of this amazing synchronicity. Is he's writing a book that has to do with the gods are and he has all these synchronicities in his life, and he was writing about the Black Swan event, and here he turns to my page and there's that. So for him, that was a reflection. That was saying an affirmation of, yes, this is happening. And so, Mike, when you are doing all of your, when you're researching a thing, I want to focus on this, do you notice certain types of UFO reports come in as you're researching or reading or exploring? Have you noticed the synchronicity with that?
Honestly, I haven't been that active in investigations the last few months, but the two I've had were from people who had extremely personal experiences. And I'm still not clear whether it was an abduction or what, but they were really having these personal encounters with entities at different levels, both in their home and outside of their home. That seem to really reflect their own attitude. So, again, and this is a pretty limited sample, but the last two cases I've had were along those lines, where these gentlemen, they both live in Kansas, were having paranormal, or again, call it paranormal. I don't know. There's a blending between UFOs and entities and aliens and paranormal, but there was a direct correlation between their ideas, their fear, their attitudes, and what was happening in their life. So, again, the more you think these things, the more it can come or go. And in my case, where I had, during this period of recovery, where I had a whole bunch of things going on, including little fishes disappearing and all kinds of crazy things, and I called it an exorcist.
Okay, yeah. Wait, well, let's take a break because I want to go back into that because that's where the meat is. That's where all these things are just like one thing after another. All right, so and again, this is a mix of the miracles and the unexplained, the supernatural, the paranormal, and the book One Step at a Time, Memoir of a Former Quadriplegic, will maybe give you a little support in changing your own reality and knowing you're in charge. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Okay, Mike McCord is my guest, and with this, we go into the recovery period. How long were you incapacitated in the hospital?
Oh, about 2 months before I began getting recovery and started walking with assistance, and then it went from there. But I was totally quadriplegic for at least 3 months.
What were you feeling when you were first released from the hospital?
Well, I didn't fully understand the nature of the injury. And, I thought they said he had a bruise on the spinal cord. I'm like, well, you want a bruise, But come to find out, it was very serious, and it was called a Brown's cord injury, and I had a C5 neck break. So I finally did ask for help. I'm not a terribly religious person. I am spiritual. So one day I was in the hospital. I asked God, I said, what do I do to get out of this? And immediately the words that came to me were, do what's doable whenever you can, work on your areas of strength first, and never give up or believe. So I use that as my mantra, and it really did begin to make a difference in my life. And then I had another epiphany where I saw everything as a miracle. And in my mind, to this day, I believe that when I saw these things and realized the beauty of it all, I basically turned away from fear and began to look at the world in a different way, and through eyes of love and understanding. And I am totally convinced that that's when my healing began. Instead of letting that fear dominate me, that I then looked at everything as a possibility. And to this day, I'm thankful for every moment. I find beauty in everything, and it's really turned out to be one of the greatest blessings of my life.
Well, part of it, too, I want to ask about, because when I've heard people recover, there's also a forgiveness. Instead of blaming the situation or blaming others for things that don't work out the way you want them to, there's a release of maybe it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, but it worked out the way it needed to for me to go on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I guess, it makes me think of one thing, because I was making this recovery, and I did, was getting more and more, doing more and more things. And I remember, I can't remember the day it happened, but I can remember when I said, well, when I was small, I was really doing pretty good. And I remember thinking, well, that's probably not good enough. And I should never have thought, because once I heard that was it. And that was good enough, which is okay. I mean, I still walk with a limp, and I have pain at night and heaviness and so forth. But that was that small bit of doubt. So the key is to have a clear intention that you're going to be better, that things are going to be better, and then pray, or whatever you want, what word you want to use. Think as though it's already been done. And then lastly and importantly is to take action to make it come to pass. And as I say in my book, through faith, belief, and action, all things are possible. And this is what Jesus said too. So those are the keys. I mean, and there's certainly more to it, but you've got to really be committed to those things, and you can change your life. Well,
part of it too was the goal that you set. Here's somebody who's incapacitated, quadriplegic, in a hospital, and everybody around you is going, oh, this guy it's too bad. There's no hope. And you're saying, I'm going to climb a mountain. Yep, that's my mountain. It's got my name on it. It's just a matter of me getting out of here so I can make it happen. So your mindset at that point is completely out of that room and on the path. That's huge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's many ways to do this. I mean, one thing is, of course, in Miracles does talk about these things. But, I mean, I use visualization, meditation, listen to tapes. I mean, some of the most chicken soup for the soul. I mean, every possible thing I could get my hands on. How to Know God by Deepak Chopra. I give a lot of sources of these in the book. But those ideas, I mean, there's another book called Remarkable Recoveries that chronologizes, I think, hundreds and hundreds of stories of people with cancer and all kinds of, fatal diseases were diagnosed as fatal, and how they overcame them.
You're feeding your consciousness. You're feeding it insight, awareness, information, data that says, okay, this is how it works, this is how it has happened, this is how it has been done, and you're feeding your consciousness ideas and giving it a framework for saying, oh, if they have done it, I am doing it too, and this is how it works. So you're seeing success story after success story, and in my way, integrating that into your own being so that you can follow suit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to just mention, because, again, and this is from the book called Remarkable Recoveries. I have the citation, but you can look it up. They said that I found that there are the following about 6 similarities for patients that have recovered from terminal diagnoses. I'll just read them real quickly.
Yeah.
One is to accept the diagnosis but reject the prognosis. The second one is make decisions according to your particular belief system and understanding, not somebody else's. The third is having at least one spatial healing relationship and understanding with a loved one, a health professional, a friend, a support group, or a therapist. And the fourth is get in touch with unexpressed emotions, as you were talking about, releasing fear and these doubts that you had.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, rediscovering joy, creativity, a purpose of life, a sense of worth, and a reason to be on this planet, or a feeling of fulfillment. And that really is kind of a common thread for people. Hundreds of stories of people that have come back from these bad situations.
What I see, and daily, we're going through this pandemic where there are, and not only that, with all of the rioting and the outrage over things that are basically unjust, we're getting an IV drip of negative and of panic and of fear and all that stuff. And I try to sort through that daily to find the reasons to celebrate the people who are heroes in their communities by no other fact than being in the right place at the wrong time, but the right place for I think 70 people who were being tear gassed and corralled into an area where they could not escape. And the guy opened up his house to 70 people that he had no idea who they were. And of course, this is a pandemic situation. He just says, come on in, come on in, come on in. And it's an extraordinary story. So no matter how much negativity is going on, I think right now is a time to celebrate the beautiful humans among us who are still saying, this isn't my story. My story is a happy ending. And they're creating happy endings for other people by just being who they are and having compassion and sensitivity and being willing to act in really difficult situations. I think that's what you epitomize, is that there is a happy outcome, and I'm going to find that to bring myself back to healing. And like you said, almost 95% recovered, and that's an extraordinary story.
Oh, I so agree. I mean, as they say, when you volunteer or do something for others, you of course help others, but the benefit really is to you benefit in ways psychically, emotionally, and even physically, as much or more sometimes. So I guess to summarize my lessons I've learned, there's really basically 3 of them, and I do live these things. One is to be thankful for every moment, because it really can be taken away from you in just a wink of an eye. Secondly, through faith, belief, and committing intention to action, all things are possible, and so never give up on your dreams. And then lastly, to love one another. Sometimes and this is what you were saying, Wendy, sometimes the smallest act of kindness, whether it's even smiling at the checkout lady or something, can affect their lives in ways you may never understand or maybe even know. But you can make a difference in the world, and this is an opportunity for everybody to understand it and come together. It's an important moment in history, and I think it's an opportunity too.
Yes, it's actually a live out loud moment in history. Okay, Mike McCord, the book, One Step at a Time, Memoir of a Former Quadriplegic. The website, miraclesonestepatatime.com. Buy the book, check out the story, and I love, the other people that you had for inspiration, all the footnotes with that too. Thank you for listening. Wendy's Coffee House. This story continues on the website. In the archives, we've got the extended version of Mike's interview. Check out the website, Wendy's Coffee House, Audio Boom. Thanks for listening.
We get our weekly groceries delivered through Instacart because once football season starts, game time is family time. I can get everything my family needs for the week, from reliable staples to specialty ingredients, all delivered right to my door in as fast as 1 hour. So I can stay on my game without missing a minute of the game. Visit Instacart.com or download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply. Instacart. Add life to cart.
Shopify helps businesses break sales records over the holidays with the world's best converting checkout. Let's hear that one more time. The world's best converting checkout. Shopify's legendary checkout makes it easier for customers to shop on your website, across social media, and everywhere in between. Now that's music to your ears. Any way you spin it, you can be a smash hit with Shopify. Start your $1 a month trial today at shopify.com/records.